What fascinates me about this story is really sort of the people around him, and because uh, the as far as I can tell, through your reporting, there was a lot of people who basically functioned as a check on the worst of his worst impulses to the extent that they could, right? I mean, there's a lot of like people are quiet around him, but they're panicking inside on some level. I mean, let's talk about COVID. Like, what what did he just simply decide at one point? Like, this is. I mean, was he under the belief that this was just not real enough that he could just sort of plow through it, or was it just a belief that like nothing's real enough that you can't just plow through it?
I love this question, Sam, because it gets right to the heart of a theme that's just true about Donald Trump. He had a particular way of governing and leading that really didn't have to do with governing and leading. He was fixated on winning the hourly or daily news cycle. It was all about the impression, the optics. It was all about what he could sell, essentially, kind of like the real estate developer. Can I convince people that these condos are really the height of luxury and that most of them have already been purchased and you better get in now before they're all gone? I mean, his optics game is really good. But unfortunately, that toolkit, that skill set was not just woefully inadequate, it was a disaster when he applied it to a real crisis. In fact, in our first book, A Very Stable Genius, we talked with sources who essentially foreshadowed this. They warned us, we're so lucky that Donald Trump hasn't been hit and this country hasn't been hit with a real crisis. As for his belief, your central question about the belief, he believed everything could be managed as a PR event. And unfortunately, what people needed in a public health crisis, a lethal virus marching over the globe from China to Europe to the United States, not exactly always that way, but overwhelmingly that way. What they really needed was clear, straight information, not happy talk. They needed to know how to protect themselves. That's not what Donald Trump wanted to give them. Donald Trump wanted to convince them the economy's great. Shut Nancy Messonnier up, this CDC official who's warning people that our lives are going to change. Get her away from the microphone. We need to tell everybody everything's going to be fine. Well, that's not how you protect American lives. And unfortunately, we found that out.
What's interesting too is just that it, if this had been approached in a way where facts were given, there's evidence that the American people would have responded to that. I mean, I believe that there wouldn't be this PR backlash that he anticipated, but it's like, it's almost as if he knows nothing else, and his mind doesn't really move past that. Like, I mean, I know you kind of answered that earlier by saying that that's how he sees the world, but is that an accurate characterization? Because, was there ever a glimpse or a thought of doing something differently? Because I think the frustration with him when there were so many unknowns, and that's why someone like Andrew Cuomo got a ton of free media, was that there was just nobody giving facts.
Yes, there was nobody giving facts or no one authorized to give facts. And Emma, I think the point's a good one. Like he could have won re-election in the view of many of the people around him if he had just sort of owned the virus in the sense of, okay, look, this thing happened to us and I'm your leader and your savior and your protector. And here's what we all need to do. Bill Barr, we learned for the reporting for our book, came to the president in April, and he was pretty adamant and warning the president privately, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, you are going to lose this election if you keep up with this chaotic infighting and impulsive news conferences, these weird circusy shows, this place where you talk about injecting bleach in the body as a possible solution, and where you dispute what your health advisors said the other day. This stuff's making voters anxious. And even people who really support you and what you do, that group is going to start to peel away from you. And actually, Bill Barr was right.
But I mean, was he that right? You know, and I guess this is a question more about the American public. I mean, Donald Trump, you know, 40,000, I think 40, maybe 50,000 votes switching the other way in 3 states. What is it? Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia. He would have tied, I think, in the Electoral College. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I mean, for a guy who was saying inject bleach into your body, and I want credit for that idea just in case it actually works. That's a pretty close election.
You know, if memory serves, and I apologize, I think it might be 74 million voted for Trump, 80 million or abouts for Biden. So it wasn't that close, but you're right about certain swing states. I don't dispute that at all. I think what Barr was getting at is there's going to be a group within your sort of ardent supporters that are going to get tired of this and get worried about this. And he was right about that. But there's no question, there is a core group of people that Donald Trump masterfully tapped into, who feel angry, who feel fearful, angry that the country's going in a direction they don't like, worried about the diversity of this country, in a strange way, fearful of how the economic winds are not blowing their way. They may be in some instances, Trump supporters are the first generation in these forgotten, rural communities that are going to see their children not do better than them. So he has tapped into that community and dubbed himself their savior. And so many of them still to this day believe it.
Sure. All right, let's talk about like the challenges. I mean, I think you and Phillip interviewed over 140 different people over the course of this. Maybe I can't.
That's right. That's right.
And to what extent, like, I mean, there's a lot of people who enter into this administration, and certainly when you're talking about like the last year of the administration, right? They've seen the implications of that for some of the people, right? You know, Sean Spicer's on Dancing with the Stars, and now he's on OWN. I mean, congratulations. But there's it could for some people have an impact on their careers. To what extent did you feel? To what extent could you? I mean, how did you approach the dilemma that a lot of these people, particularly as you get further into 2020 and the president is saying, inject yourself with bleach or something to that effect during a pandemic, are trying to, they're involved in a reformation project for themselves, that.
Yeah, I get you. I get your question. It's a good one. And you know why I like it, Sam, is I think more and more it's incumbent on reporters like myself and Phil to sort of show our work like a math class. Like we want to explain to people how we do it in the era of fake news and how successful Donald Trump was in promoting that idea that reporters are making stuff up. Oh, I wish, if only it were so easy. It would be a lot easier to be a reporter if we made stuff up. But no, we actually corroborate everything. There are many things we don't publish because we're so careful. Even though we think they are true, we have to meet a very high standard. I feel as though what's really important is to show our work. And in this instance, many people spoke to us on background because they were afraid of the pain and vindication that Trump could bring down on their heads if they spoke out against him publicly. That will change over time, I'm sure. But we were on guard for folks trying to rewrite history in a way that was more favorable to them. We were on guard for people who were trying to burnish a slightly damaged reputation and tell a story in which they were braver or stronger or more of an obstacle to Donald Trump's dangerous ideas than they actually were. And what we found was when we went to corroborate some of the claims with people who weren't fans of those individuals, their stories stood up. And the ones that didn't, we didn't publish. You know, we had to test these with documents, with independent, objective witnesses, and that was important to us.
When one of the things that you talk about was Lafayette Park, right? And I guess you also reported in the book that Trump really wanted to bring out the military for Black Lives Matter protesters, and was more or less dissuaded from that. But let's talk about the Lafayette Park, because there was a new, the Inspector General report came out, I guess, a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago. How did that line up for you? Like, the Inspector General report says now that they weren't clearing it for the sake of Donald Trump, but they were clearing it because they needed to put up fencing, which also just seems bizarre to me. Like, maybe you want to do that at night when nobody's there, as opposed to having to bring in a person. Like, what's your sense of what happened there?
I'm with you. I mean, I think that I reported this in real time. I reported on this shortly after the fact, and I reported it again for the book. And each time I learned something new, and it did not dissuade me from my earliest instinct, which is the Secret Service, something I know fairly well, is never going to cross that square with a group of protesters gathered there and take the president across it unless that park is entirely cleared. And there was no reason to clear the park urgently other than the president's decision that afternoon and his coordination with his White House chief of staff and his Secret Service team to go across the square for a photo op. Remember, that Monday morning, June 1, began with the president livid. I mean, trying to rip the skin off people's faces. He was so angry, meeting with his chief of staff, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, his chief of staff, forgive me, I'm going to blank, Mark Meadows, his defense secretary, Mark Esper. He's meeting with them. And why is he angry? He's angry that it's been reported that he had to be taken to the bunker a couple of nights before. He's not mad that he was taken to the bunker. He's mad that it looks weak, that he had to hide from the protesters, the Black Lives Matter. He says to them, well, what are foreign leaders thinking? I can't even control my own Capitol, my own White House. I must look weak to them. He wants this fixed. And his solution that he devises with his daughter, Ivanka Trump, that afternoon is, instead of bringing 10,000 military troops to the square, he's going to walk across Lafayette Square and hold up a Bible to show that he's got control over this city. He's able to walk out the front door. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer to your question, but that report, by the way, that you mentioned, I'm sorry, that's a completely incomplete picture of what happened. The Inspector General in that case, appointed by Donald Trump, did not interview the key people at the White House or anyone at the Secret Service. So how can it answer the question of what the purpose was if you don't talk to the two people who were planning the only urgent reason to clear the square that afternoon?
I mean, I'm with you. I mean, it just sounds like just a bizarre decision. Like, we need to do this right now. Coincidentally, after we do it, the president has decided, well, that's clear. Like, we need to put this fencing up right now when there's thousands of people there. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And
it's not only logistically, it's not only rationally dubious. The facts indicate that, I mean, the reporting we did for the book indicates that the real order came from the White House.
And I think at first, I think it was Barr had claimed, if I remember correctly in the sequence, that Barr had said that it was his decision. Like, he walked out there and said, we're going to go across. The whole thing sounded dubious, but it also, I find disturbing the idea that, like, the Inspector General, which is supposed to be sort of function as close to an ombudsperson as we can get, in the context, in this context, is that highly politicized, right? Like, I mean, like they're supposed to be independent.
Yeah, and I'm wary of reaching a conclusion without facts that the Inspector General is politicized. I'm just mentioning a fact, which is that he was appointed by Trump. He insisted at the time of the report that politics and Trump's appointment have nothing to do with the way he sculpted the report. But as a reporter, a journalist, a researcher that tries to gain the exact same information, I really wouldn't have a complete story if I didn't talk to the people who were arranging for the reason to clear the report. I'm sorry, clear the square.
I hear you. I will make that conclusion since I don't have those bona fides.
Editorialize.
Exactly.